Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to Patrol Rip. This is Mark Ewing. First live stream event. Hopefully it works. Welcome to Patrol Rep. I'm very interested to see who we have watching tonight. Two are watching. All right. Well, I'm going to be talking about the subconscious and how that pertains to my book. I know you're curious about it because you're here. So we'll get started, and I know you're curious about it because you're here. I can't tell if there's feedback or what. What you're seeing now is the image of the YouTube channel Patrol Rep, and for the most part, I don't know how familiar you are with the Bardo, but I envision the Bardo as relevant to my book because I'm kind of talking about the mind control that a government can use against its citizens. So I think that we're all susceptible to fears being implanted in our subconscious. And I'd like to go over a nice website by John Keyhole called Mind Power. So what he talks about is that we all have a subconscious. Most of us don't know anything about it. And basically, it's incredibly fertile soil that will grow any seed you plant in it. Your habitual thoughts and beliefs are seeds that are being constantly sown. Your conscious mind is like the gardener that tends to the soil. It's your responsibility to be aware of how this process works, choosing wisely what reaches the inner garden, your subconscious. For most of us, our role as gardeners has never been explained. By not knowing this role, we have allowed seeds of all types, good and bad, to enter our subconscious. The subconscious doesn't discriminate, judge, or censor. It will manifest success, abundance, and health just as easily as failure, ill health, and misfortune. Your subconscious accepts what is impressed upon it with feeling and repetition. Whether these thoughts are positive or negative, it does not evaluate things like your conscious mind does. This is why it is so important to be aware of what you're thinking. Once you understand that our subconscious will bring you what you need or desire, and you begin working daily to project thoughts and images of what you want, seemingly chance events will start happening to you. To the untrained mind, synchronicity appears to be the coincidence or luck, but it is neither. It is simply the operation of the forces you have set into motion with your thoughts. This powerful inner collaborator, working with your conscious mind, will bring to you the people and circumstances you require to achieve your goals. Modern physics sees the universe as a vast, inseparable web of dynamic activity. Not only is the universe alive and constantly changing, but everything in the universe affects everything else. At its most primary level, the universe seems to be whole and undifferentiated, a fathomless sea of energy that permeates every object and every act. It is all one. Scientists are now confirming what mystics and seers have been telling us for thousands of years. We are not separate from, but part of one greater whole. We now know that everything in the universe is made up of energy, everything from the items in your home to the events that happen to you, and even our thoughts are made up of vibrations and energy. This means our thoughts are made of the exact same substance as the building blocks of the universe. Knowing this, we can use it to our advantage. In the past, it might have seemed unbelievable that we could create our reality through this process, but we now know how to do it and why it works. Since our thoughts are energy, it only makes sense that repeated images, affirmations, deeply held beliefs, fears, and desires would have an effect on our own reality by vibrating within the larger web of reality. In fact, if we are all connected, how could it be otherwise? So I strongly recommend John Kehoe, K-E-H-O-E, Mind Power website. It's called learnmindpower.com. And I took the time to read that because I think it's really important in relation to my book. And my book is all about finding the seam in history that kind of unravels these invisible fears and concepts that are externally passed into our subconscious. So I created a narrative story called Wrathful Empathies, the Second Raid on Harper's Ferry. And it's all about a group of freedom fighters that were spawned by the first raid on Harper's Ferry, who survived the assault, escaped into the surrounding mountains. And generation after generation, they kept being the gardeners of not only their subconscious, but everyone else's subconscious. Because they realized that there was a secret dark power at work who was distorting reality. Now, why would they distort reality? That's another live stream. But what they do is they hike a physical path, they hike a spiritual path, and they're constantly battling against the fears that are out there in the bardo, trying to not only save themselves, but push back on the darkness that is threatening to overtake the universe. Because if everyone thinks negative thoughts, then the universe will become negative. So the image of the hiker hiking what I call the Great Trail, which is really just a term I came up with to indicate not only the Appalachian Trail that spans, 13 states, very close to the 13 original colonies, but They're hiking this trail, communicating with each other, communicating across time and space, doing their own special operations, and most importantly, tracking the ancestry of those original survivors down through time. And some of them have the ability to transition into another dimension. That's where I get the term wrathful empathies. Wrathful empathy is somebody who practices what I would call tough love. I mentioned that on my author's blog. I have a blog post about that. What is tough love? Because it's what is that balance between someone like John Brown, who would not abide by injustice and inequality and actually took direct action through violence? And how did the government react to that? So juxtapose John Brown with someone like Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who is well aware of the evilness of the Soviet system and communism and the mind control of that political ideology. But he did it peacefully through the written word. So it's interesting to track both of these historical figures and see that both of them were equally prosecuted. One was executed. The other one could have been executed had he not been highly visible in the West. Became a bargaining chip. But one of these guys plumbed the physical dimension to battle those evil thoughts. And the other battled the mental dimension to educate people and make them aware of what was at stake if an ideology takes hold and takes root and destroys free thinking. But in both dimensions, it's possible that people are lost and wandering, and they really need some kind of guide. So patrol rep is it's a term for patrol report. And what I envision is these heroic figures going out into the bardo, which is what the Tibetan Buddhists believe is the place your soul goes after you die. And you kind of are physically separated from your body for the first time. You only exist as a soul. You're very confused. You're very lost. And all the fears of your life come back to you from your subconscious and prevent you from really understanding the reality of your condition, the reality of the universe, and prevent you from a reincarnation that moves you further up the realm of understanding. So I know it's probably not in any kind of strict adherence to Buddhism, but I made it up myself that I imagined a patrol group of these heroes, these John Brown survivors, these mystical warriors that go in to the vast wasteland of the bardo, desolate, scary, in search of souls who need guidance. So that's where that symbol came from. Let me go back to it. Sorry. That's where that symbol comes from. So what I think is really important is to find the seam in your everyday life by studying current events, read history, and use your common sense to say, that doesn't quite make sense. Why? What was wrong with John Brown liberating the slaves? What was wrong with John Brown giving them the arms to liberate themselves? Why did we have to have 600,000 soldiers die in the Civil War? Why couldn't the slaves have just liberated themselves? You know, that was a very interesting observation on my part. And why is he still treated as such an enigmatic figure in history today? Is he a hero? Is he an anarchist? Is he a terrorist? What is he exactly? So for me, that was a scene that opened up to view the mind control that's out there. And I just love going to Harper's Ferry. I've been going there as a little kid, hiking around the mountains, walking around the town, totally confused about the history of John Brown and the treatment of him, how he was portrayed. Kind of was portrayed as just a crazy guy, that did all this stuff, dangerous, scary guy. And his action was threatening because I think it fell outside of any kind of governmental ordained violence. And so as an author, I just decided to imagine what would happen if the spirit of John Brown somehow survived in a secret network of survivors that might have escaped in the night before the final assault into the mountains and continued, the underground battle for freedom. So that's Wrathful Empathies. There's a lot more to it. I kind of weaved in the whole Tibetan Book of the Dead because I do think they're fighting a different realm, the physical world and the spiritual world. And there is some kind of invisible hand, writing history, giving us a script that serves a purpose that's not beneficial to us as thinking people who need to garden and maintain a clean subconscious. So that's a broad overview of the book. Let me see if there's any questions, no chats or anything. So if you have any comments, feel free to chat me. Go to my website, wrathfulempathies.com. And I try to post blogs on imagination, because I'm a middle-aged person, not a professional creative writer. It's something I decided to do. I've always wanted to do. And all you need is really imagination. You can always fine-tune your writing skills. I mean, that's certainly required, and that was a painful process too. Figure out how to write. But I think anyone can do it. I think the hardest part is just to have an imagination. And I have a crazy story to tell. In that, I think anyone can do it. I think the hardest part is just to have an imagination. I weave in a lot of different plots. Because I'm just enamored by early American history. I'm enamored by the thought of people taking charge of their own fate through the revolution, creating the Constitution, they created a Declaration of Independence, Bill of Rights, Constitution, and that was under a threat immediately. And I happened to live in the Shenandoah Valley, and I was always seeing these signs about Lord Fairfax. Who was Lord Fairfax in history? And how can entire county be named after him in Virginia universities? But no one really understands who he was, what he meant to us, and I just decided to explore that historically. He has a very interesting character, and I write about him and his land grant of 4 million acres and what he did with it and how he chose to live. He chose to avoid high society in colonial Williamsburg, which was the capital of Virginia colony at the time. And he lived west of the Blue Ridge. He lived all the way out in the frontier country, which was still incredibly dangerous at the time. He lived in a modest log cabin, even though he was a lord. So from a rigid class structure of the early English settlers, he was at the pinnacle of it. But yet he kind of embraced the whole Republican lifestyle. He was a common man. He was very fair to people, and he sold his parcels at fair prices. And he actually lost lots of money because he was swindled by land developers and people that worked for him. But he honored all these illegal grants that were given and sold without his knowledge. It's an interesting character, and my first chapter of the book starts out with his death and how he transitions into the bardo and tries to redeem himself as a soul. And in the, what I call the Golden Path, which is he's probably the original bardo patrolman, conceptually. But what's interesting is, there are a lot of people who are excited about the American Revolution. It was a time of trying to break away from the rigid aristocracy, the monarchy. We wanted, some kind of representational government. The whole world really was watching the American experiment. We gave birth to a republic, but immediately the forces started to attack that republic. And one of my favorite authors, poets, is William Blake. And he wrote a poem about this entire episode called America, a Prophecy. So I kind of weave that into my book too. So it's a crazy story, but it's I'll try to go through the book on these live streams, chapter by chapter in the future, and just explain where it's all coming from. Because if you haven't exposed yourself to these different histories and religious ideologies and political ideologies, then you may not understand it. So this is like a compendium to the book to help people. Also, I think that all of us together can serve as the Bardo Patrol, and we can watch current events and point out the seams where things don't quite make sense, where threads are loose. They have not done a very good job of presenting a flawless scenario to us. So it's possible, as gardeners, we can maintain our own subconscious and those of others through observation, discussion, meditation of what's happening in the world today, discuss history, and see if anything's repeating itself. But I think, it should be interesting going forward to talk about this, and look forward to, again, any comments that we have, any kind of discussion, any questions you have about the book, or my blog, which is, again, www.wrathfulempathies.com. And while the YouTube channel is going to focus on current events, helping everyone to see the active manipulation of our subconscious by whatever power runs our society. The blog post is more about the history of where I'm coming from, how I developed my narrative story, how you develop your imagination as a writer, because it's really important to practice, creating, basically. So I have a little blog post in there, but taking a picture and just having the picture create a story itself, and how you can practice your writing, and what you can use for your inspiration, and just the mechanics of writing. So the blog is more technical, where the YouTube channel is going to be more current and interactive, I hope. So let me see. YouTube channel is going to be anyway, that's all I had for today. I will schedule another one, and I'll try to keep the YouTube channel with some videos of hopefully me backpacking, which is a big hobby of mine. I think it's helped my creativity, my imagination, to be out in nature, to be alone. There's nothing like being in the dark forest at night by yourself, to let your imagination run wild. And that's where I got some of my ghost stories. So it's very helpful, and I really enjoy doing that. And I was fortunate enough to get some good camera equipment recently, so I think I'm going to be able to have better quality videos. Anyway, that's all I had for today. I'd like to just spend a minute kind of decompressing, contemplating, meditating. There's a great chapter in my book, I like it anyway, about a mythical, fictional, it is fictional, but it was historical college in Harpers Ferry, West Virginia. So I imagine a college radio station disc jockey broadcasting out into the night, dark night, one winter. And he is broadcasting to the physical audience of listeners tuned into the radios, but he's also broadcasting to his fellow kindred warriors who are out on the physical mountain paths, trails. Also, they're in the supernatural dimension, battling the evil authority. And there's a nice little description in the chapter about him giving them a shout out and a prayer, and he knows something's going to happen that night operationally with the second raid on Harpers Ferry. So he knows that everything's going to change, within an hour, a minute. So let's use this as a broadcast in the spirit of that disc jockey. Standing Bear is his name. So please tune in again. I appreciate anyone who was curious enough to follow this live stream, and look forward to doing it again. Please tune in again. Thank you. Good night. What a disaster. Oh yeah, stop.